Coming up today, things are getting very weird very quickly. Donald Trump is trying to change the rules for mail-in voting right before the midterms, but we now have state officials essentially telling him absolutely not. And one said, "Over my dead body." Meanwhile, something sort of mysterious is happening inside of Secret Service where three officials have suddenly been marched out. They had their security clearances suspended, their devices were seized, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. Now, over at Fox News, Laura Ingraham seems very worried about November, while another Fox host cuts off a guest to discover afterwards that the guest was right. And Trump is now giving interviews where he can barely get through a thought. He's confusing gallons with barrels and talking about getting rid of meat inspection. And it is all coming in the middle of this bizarre campaign against Lake Ontario, Trump versus a lake. Plus, Dr. Zach Rubin will join me. We've got a show today. All right, we talked yesterday about Donald Trump trying to impose these outrageous new restrictions on mail-in voting just a few weeks before the midterm elections. And there was some bad news. A federal judge cleared the way, at least for now, for the Trump administration to move forward. But I am here to remind you, as I said yesterday, this thing is absolutely not over. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays, just for example, is suing to stop Trump's new restrictions. And she was asked about this new rule and gave about as direct an answer as you can possibly give. The phrase "over my dead body" was part of her answer. Take a listen to this.
Election is going to affect this election, and if it does, do you have any sense of how many Arizonans might not get early ballots delivered?
Well, what I would say is, over my dead body is that rule going to go into effect. We are going to fight this tooth and nail in the courts.
Yes.
And I've got the best solicitor general in the country standing right there, who is going to make sure, along with the other attorneys general who are fighting this case. I think 25 states signed on to this lawsuit this morning. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There is a second injunction, but the second injunction is on the executive order. What the Supreme Court actually did is they ruled that our first lawsuit was not ripe, and now it is ripe. So it became ripe.
All right, so we get into more of a legal explanation here, but this is the attitude we need. What does Trump think he's going to do? Hell no. Over my dead body is Trump going to do that. So Mays is now part of this bigger legal effort. As she said, 20-something states have signed on to it. And the whole point is we're going to stop this rule before the November election. This is an outrageous thing to be doing. So let me kind of explain where things actually stand, because the headlines about the court ruling yesterday made it sound like Trump won and this is all over and it's happening. But that is not really what happened. The judge did lift the injunction that had been blocking the administration, but the court did not rule Trump's mail-in voting restrictions are legal. The problem with the earlier lawsuit was essentially it was too early. The USPS hadn't finalized the rule. It's not completely clear how this would be implemented. Well, now they have finalized the rule. So now they're getting sued over the actual rule. And what Trump is trying to do here is pretty extraordinary. The new system, if it went into force, would require states to give the Postal Service lists of voters who are getting mail-in ballots. Ballot envelopes would need special barcodes. And if a ballot doesn't comply with the new requirements, the Postal Service could simply say, we are making the decision not to deliver it. Now, there is an argument that that is simply not the Postal Service's call to make. The Postal Service doesn't run elections. The Postal Service doesn't make determinations about voter eligibility. But take a step back. We are 2 months from the midterms. States have started election procedures. They're preparing ballots. Election officials have been getting ready for this for months, if not years. And suddenly Trump comes in and goes, actually, we're going to change how election mail works right before people start voting. So it's understandable why states are freaking out. And Arizona's sort of particularly interesting as an example, because voting by mail is not a weird Democrats only kind of thing there. This is how Arizona votes. More than 3/4 of Arizona voters choose to use vote by mail. And of course, that includes Republicans, roughly to the same extent that it includes Democrats as well as independents. Arizona has been doing this for years. And in comes the Trump administration right before an election, and they want to impose this entirely new federal system on top of it, deputize the USPS to decide we will or won't deliver this one. And their excuse, which it's been for years, the administration says, oh, this is about election security. We have to make sure only eligible voters are voting. And the states suing Trump are basically saying, you don't get to do this because of the law and because of the Constitution, which you claim is almost like a sacred text to you. The Constitution, it's so quaint, right? The Constitution, who cares? Well, the Constitution gives states and Congress authority over federal elections. The president doesn't have that authority. The president can't wake up one morning and say, well, how about if I use the Postal Service to create my own set of voting rules? And so this is why the court decision is not the end of the story. And it may really be only the beginning of the legal fight. Now, the ACLU is involved. Other voting rights groups are back in court. They're trying to block this. Arizona and roughly two dozen other states are fighting it as well. And I can't help but go back to the issue of the timing here, because ballots are going out really soon. Some of the latest primaries are happening over the next week. And then early ballots are starting for the general election. Now, Sophia Lakin of the ACLU says that the chaos that this is causing isn't a side effect, it's the point. The point is to make things really chaotic. And we have to look at it this way. Even if the courts ultimately block Trump, think about what happens in the meantime. People wondering, do I need a different ballot? Is my ballot going to be delivered? Do I need to request a ballot again? Does my state need to change something? Is my vote going to count? What happens if the Postal Service rejects it? Will I be notified? Do I have to look somewhere? You introduce all of these questions just weeks before an election, and suddenly people truly don't know what the hell is going on. So yes, Trump got a favorable court development, but he did not get the final word. And it should be inspiring to all of us that there are people like Chris Mays saying, I am going to fight this over my dead body. And she and others are going to fight this every step of the way. Now, ultimately, we will see what the courts say. We know what they're trying to do. We know why they're trying to do it. We know why they're trying to do it right now. They're terrified. And we will, by the way, another element of today's elements of voting, another element of today's show is going to be the slow creeping realization for a lot of these people, the Fox News hosts and the clingers and the hangers on, that they may well get crushed. And all of a sudden, the investigations are going to hit them. So we will see what the courts say. We are not going to give up. We have something very strange happening inside Donald Trump's Secret Service. 3 officials, including the agency's top spokesperson, have been marched out of their offices. Their security clearances were suspended, and their devices have been seized by the government. And here is where this gets very interesting. We don't even know yet what they're accused of doing. It seems they're accused of doing something pretty serious, but we don't know what. And this is happening while the Trump administration is trying to figure out, very aggressively, I might add, who leaked the fact that this is going on. This, in a sense, is it's certainly one of the most bizarre, but it's one of the most apparently sensitive stories of Trump's presidency as well. The story of Trump secretly escaping Turkey in a catering cart. I'll explain what we know. The Daily Mail reports that Secret Service comms director Anthony Guglielmi and 2 other officials in the department were physically removed from their offices on Monday. Now, according to CNN, all 3 were placed on leave. They had their security clearances suspended. They had their work devices taken. So we already can see that this is apparently serious enough that it's involving the FBI and the CIA because of the sensitive nature of Secret Service. Now, an important caveat here is that the Secret Service has not made any statements so far as to what is even alleged as far as the misconduct. And we don't know that these 3 officials are accused of leaking anything. The timing is what's interesting. You've got FBI Director Kash Patel hunting for the source of a leak about what happened that day when Trump went to the NATO summit in Turkey and then was moved off of the normal presidential plane into this other plane, even though Marco Rubio was left on the main plane and Trump was in a catering truck with Natalie Harp. That entire thing, it sounded like it was out of a movie. And all of it was because Trump was supposedly facing an Iranian assassination threat. And so they made the decision, instead of leaving Turkey normally aboard Air Force One, we're going to clandestinely swap planes. Fine. Now, the operation was supposed to be secret. Somebody told the press about it, and Kash Patel is furious, and he wants to know who. So the Washington Post's new reporting about the secret departure triggered a separate investigation by Patel, and FBI agents reportedly went to Secret Service and said, hey, what do you know about this? Is it possible that someone from Secret Service was the leaker? Now, we don't yet have proof that these two elements are connected, but we now have 3 people from the Secret Service communications operation kicked out of their offices, devices taken, and security clearances stripped while the FBI was already looking for a Secret Service leak. Now, maybe the two things are ultimately not connected, or maybe they are. We don't know yet, but there is clearly a big story unfolding inside this agency. And this is an agency where sometimes it does happen that the Secret Service is pulled into controversy and drama. But the idea, at least, is that Secret Service is there to protect people. They are above the political fray. They are above the gossip. They are above the drama of investigations. But now it's hitting them. Now, there's another piece of context that I think is important here. This guy, Guglielmi, the comms director, he is not a water boy, an intern, or some new employee. He's been running Secret Service communications since the Biden administration and was there through all of the fallout of the Butler assassination attempt against Donald Trump. And last month, Guglielmi said an agent protecting J.D. Vance is being criminally investigated over a suspected media leak because agents complained to journalists about last-minute travel requests from J.D. Vance and his family and how annoying that is. So there's clearly this massive sensitivity inside Secret Service about info getting out, and that creates 2 questions. The first is completely legitimate. If Secret Service personnel are leaking genuinely sensitive info, which could compromise the security of a president, that's a big problem. Now, I don't care whether the president is Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or anybody else. Objectively speaking, protective information can't be handed around because reporters ask questions about it, and that can put people's lives at risk. So that would be number 1 as far as Secret Service goes. But the second question is there something broader developing here? A Trump administration obsessed with finding and punishing people inside the government who are revealing information that is embarrassing to them? Because notice what we still don't know. We don't know what the 3 Secret Service officials that were walked out allegedly did. We don't know why the CIA is reportedly involved. We don't know whether their removal is connected to Trump's bizarre, catering cart escape. What we know is that the Secret Service officials, along with a top communications official, have been sidelined. They no longer have clearances. Their devices have been taken. That's very serious. And concurrent to that, Kash Patel at the FBI is looking to figure out who said stuff to journalists about the catering truck caper. There has to be more to the story. The question now is, what exactly is the Trump administration trying to find? And are they even looking in the right places? But the theme is that there is no institution under Trump, no government agency under Trump that is immune from chaos when Trump is there. Is it because of Trump? Well, that's a question we have to figure out. We're going to try to get an answer to it. But the chaos simply follows Trump absolutely everywhere. And it is even hitting the agency tasked with protecting not only Trump. And remember, you can say, well, I personally don't care what happens to Trump. Maybe that's your view. Fine. But Secret Service in chaos means that all of their protectees, which include former officials, family of former officials, it includes Joe Biden, whoever, the entire agency is thrown into chaos, and that imperils the security of all of those people. So this is not an agency that you want to see in such a chaotic state, but under Trump, chaos is everywhere. It's following them, and it is even here. So what do you think is going on? What do you think is actually at the root of this very strange situation? 3 Secret Service people kicked out. Leave me a comment. Send me an email, info@davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show is an audience-supported program, and the best, most direct way to support the show is by becoming a member at joinpakman.com. You'll get the daily bonus show, the daily commercial-free show, and plenty of other great membership perks. Get the full experience by signing up at joinpakman.com. Well, Laura Ingraham is getting very nervous about what is going to happen to Republicans in November. And I think she recognizes to a degree she's been involved enough in the Republican hijinks, standing there behind Fauci when Fauci was testifying and standing up and demanding an apology. She's visible enough as an antagonist that she may be worried she could end up in the crosshairs of Democrats if and when they take control of the House. And she believes she has come up with a brilliant strategy for saving Republicans. And that strategy is just start lying to people. She's talking about the midterms. She admits Republicans could be headed for a brutal election. And then she says, here's what Republican candidates need to tell voters. Take a listen. And it's basically all lies. Her big plan is just lie to voters.
I disagree with the conventional wisdom. I think you have to hammer them every single day until November. Cannot wait. These consultants drive me nuts, okay? They fly around in private jets. They collect a huge amount of money. And I think they're lying to these Republican candidates. This is going to be a brutal cycle. Republicans might pull it out. We all hope they do. But they have got to hammer that they're coming for your money, your gas-powered car, your air conditioner, everything you love, your private health insurance, and they're going to take it from you. Period. End of story. I'm sorry I'm getting mad, but I mean, I guess I should be a consultant or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I should be a consultant. This is such a good idea. Now, notice what she doesn't say. She doesn't say, Republicans simply need to convince voters that Trump's policies have improved their lives. And that's not true. So it would be a very hard thing to convince voters of. Republicans need to explain to voters how the economy is working so well for them. Well, it's not. So that wouldn't be true. Republicans need to show voters how they are going to lower their health care costs. Well, they haven't, and they're not going to. Instead, it's the same stupid lies that Trump was telling about Joe Biden in 2020. They're coming for your air conditioner. Trump tried that in 2020. It was stupid. Joe Biden won. You won't be able to have indoor heating or cooling, Trump tried saying. Nobody believed it. It's ridiculous. Democrats are going to take your house and they're going to take your money and they'll say you can only have an electric vehicle and they're going to rip out the air conditioner and cancel your health insurance on the way out. That's her big strategy. And what is fascinating about it is that it proves that what I've been saying for months is right. It's not like a pat on the back. It's just been so obvious. If Republicans had accomplishments to run on, they wouldn't need to run on concocted, fabricated fear-mongering about what Democrats are supposedly going to do, even though they had a chance to do it already and they didn't do it. Remember, Obama's going to take all the guns. More guns proliferated during Barack Obama's 8 years in office. And even months before he was leaving, it was, Obama's going to take your guns. He had been there 7 3/4 years and no guns were taken. So there is no case to be made about all of the great things Republicans have done for people because Republicans in the last 2 years haven't done a damn thing for people. They've done stuff, I guess, for big corporations and the very wealthy, but nobody else. So instead she goes, just start hammering this stuff. And it is all lies. In other words, scare the hell out of people with things that we all know are never going to happen. And the reason it's going on is they know they have a massive problem going into these midterms. And she admits it. And MAGA Mike Johnson has alluded to it. They all kind of know it. She says this could be a brutal cycle. Gas prices, which Republicans spent years blaming on Joe Biden, have gone up. And it's a big problem for Trump because he said they would come down. The latest government data simply don't support Trump's claims that they've fixed consumer prices and consumer prices are coming down. Healthcare is not exactly an obvious Republican strength. Republicans allowed those enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies to expire. People are paying more. And they are now so worried about healthcare politically that Trump's operation has been telling Republican senators, you got to talk more about what we're doing on healthcare. The problem is they're not doing a damn thing. So what do you do when reality is politically difficult? According to Laura Ingraham, you just tell voters Democrats are going to take your air conditioners. They're going to be gone. And they're going to take your pickup truck and it's going to be gone and all of that stuff. Now, there are legitimate policy disagreements. So what I mean by that is between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats generally are in favor of more aggressive climate policy than Republicans. That's true. Some Democrats want to move away from gasoline-powered vehicles over time. I think at some point we're going to look back at the idea of taking fossil fuels out of the ground, transporting them around the world, refining them into gasoline, putting them into cars, and then everybody's driving around with carcinogenic trash coming out of their exhaust pipes. We're going to look at that as crazy. At some point, that's going to be crazy. We're going to move away from gas-powered vehicles. But Democrats aren't going to take your gas-powered vehicles next year if they take control of the House and Senate. That's insane. You have people who support Medicare for all, and you have people who say, I have other reform ideas that I would want to use to change private insurance. Fine, that's a debate. That is very different from telling tens of millions of people. Actually, that's not true. Telling maybe it's 500,000 people. I don't know how many are watching this crap, but there are people watching Fox. Telling people that Democrats are going to take everything you love. It's not an argument. It's just propaganda. And what is revealing is the desperation behind it, because they used these exact same lies before and they didn't work. And what Laura Ingraham is effectively acknowledging by reviving these talking points is that the problem Republicans are facing is so serious that there is no positive case they can make about what they've accomplished to convince people to vote for them. So they go with the oldest political trick imaginable, which is instead of convincing people that we've made their lives better, because we haven't, we're going to convince them that the other side is going to completely destroy their lives and their money and their car and their air conditioner and their health insurance and everything that you love. And she believes if they repeat it again and again and again between now and November, voters will forget that the people in power have done nothing for them, and they will put them back into power because they're so afraid of what Laura says Democrats would do. That tells you she has zero confidence in the other approach, which is judge Republicans on what they've done and vote accordingly. If Republicans had improved the lives of people, that's all you would need to do. You would say, we all know that you all know you're better off today than when Joe Biden left office and Donald Trump came in. Just vote based on how your life is going. They know that that's risky because people's lives on average have gotten worse. So instead, they're going with this crap. Lie, make it up. We have to make sure that they wake up that Wednesday in November miserable from the electoral beating that they took. Fox News host Will Cain invited former DNC chair Jamie Harrison onto his show, spent most of the interview interrogating him about something Harrison said, I was never booked to discuss that. And then as soon as Jamie Harrison calls him out for it, Will Cain ends the interview. But the best part is what happened the next day, because Will Cain went back and checked, and it turned out that Jamie Harrison was right. He wasn't booked to talk about DSA. He was booked to talk about the South Carolina primary. So take a look at how this fell apart. Then we'll get to the apology from Will Cain.
Well, when Donald Trump literally sat down for dinner with Nick Fuentes, right, a white nationalist, anti-Semitic, Holocaust denier, do you believe that Nick Fuentes represents every Republican? Do you think that
it's not the first time I've heard this analogy invoked, Jamie. And there's got to be, Jamie, hold on. No. That's inflammatory, and I'm going to respond to it so this conversation stays honest. It's not the first time I've heard that analogy, and you have to have the intellectual consistency and honesty to distinguish a dinner from a Senate candidate.
What is inflammatory is this. You invite somebody to come on your show to talk about the South Carolina Republican primary, and you don't even talk about the South Carolina Republican primary. This is the reason why you guys are disingenuous.
No, there's no reason.
Don't invite me to come on your show to talk about listen.
Jamie,
don't invite me to come talk on your show about the South Carolina Republican primary.
Jamie,
and you spend all your time
tilting at windmills.
About the DSA, which I'm not even a member of. So
listen to me for a second.
Talk about the DSA. Invite
All right, I'm going to have
somebody
to
from
cut
the
you off,
DSA
Jamie. Well, I'm
the
about to
next
tell
time
you,
come and talk.
if my staff
Thank you.
told
You
you
don't need to
that we
cut
were
me
talking,
off.
Jamie, you can't hear me while you're talking.
No.
If my staff told you we were going to talk about the Senate in the Republican primary, then I apologize. I was under no pretense that I'd be talking to you today about a Republican primary. I don't know why I would book a former Democratic. All right, I'm going to have to cut you off. We're talking at the same time. It does nobody a service, not you, not me, or not the audience. But I would never be interested in hearing from a former DNC chair. Thank you, Jamie Harrison. I appreciate the time. I would hope for us to go better in the future. I would never book the former head of the DNC to talk.
So he cuts it. Now, Jamie Harrison, turns out, had a point. Harrison is not a member of DSA. His complaint was, you told me we were going to talk about the South Carolina Republican primary, and instead you brought me on. You tried to turn me into a prop for a completely different segment about how radical the Democratic Party has become because 5% of DSA candidates have won their primaries. Now, Cain initially reacted as though what Harrison was saying made no sense whatsoever. And he said, if my staff told you that was the topic, then I will apologize. But I have no idea why anyone would book the former DNC chair to talk about a Republican primary. He cuts him off and he ends the segment. Afterwards, Harrison went even further and he basically said, like, lose my number, Will, never call me again. But here's where this gets really good. Will Cain apparently decided to check. Good for him, right? He actually went and looked. He went back. He reviewed the communications between his producers and Jamie Harrison. And it turns out that Jamie Harrison was right. And Will Cain came back onto television. I apologize that this video is blurry. For some reason, I just wasn't able to find it in more than 480p. And Will Cain went on TV and he did what I guess you can call an apology. When you really don't want to admit the other guy was right, it's a sort of apology. Let's take a listen.
I want to clean something up from yesterday, my conversation with Jamie Harrison, the former chairman of the DNC. We had a contentious conversation about democratic socialism and its influence inside the Democratic Party. At the end, Jamie accused me of lying to him, of baiting.
Nasty accusation.
And switching him. He said he'd been told he was coming on to talk about the South Carolina Republican primary. And he repeated that accusation afterward on X. Now, in the moment, I told him I had no idea what he was talking about, and I didn't. But I also told him that if we'd misled him, I would apologize. So I went back and reviewed the communication leading up to the interview. Nobody explicitly promised Jamie that the South Carolina primary would be the subject of the interview. There was no intentional bait and switch. That's not who I am, and that's not who we are as a show.
Of course.
But I can also see how Jamie came away believing that was what we would be talking about. That was
It's weird because it's like, why would he come away believing that if that was not part of the communication? It's really weird.
Reasonable expectation based on the communication. So I reject the idea that anybody lied to Jamie or deliberately misled him. The truth is much more mundane. There was a breakdown in communication. I would never let a guest dictate what I can ask him. Had that been the deal, I would not have agreed to the interview. But that's separate from what Jamie, I think, reasonably believed. The communication failure came from my show, and ultimately, I own it. So, Jamie, I understand why you felt misled. I know what it's like, what it feels like, if you thought you were ambushed on TV, and I understand why you were angry. And for that, I owe you an apology.
It's funny because he kind of throws in this non sequitur about I would never tell anyone what the questions are ahead of time. We've dealt with this a lot on this program. Occasionally, we are asked for the questions ahead of time, and we say, of course not. We have never sent the questions ahead of time. And only once, to be totally honest, years ago, did saying we're not going to give you the questions lead to the guest saying, well, then I'm not going to do the interview. I don't even remember who it was. It wasn't even a big name. It would be totally uninteresting, whoever it was. It was like a producer of some kind or something. In any case, we do stick to the topics we say we are going to bring up. And I think that that's completely legitimate. And I expect the same when I'm invited on other shows. If I get invited on, Piers Morgan, and in fact, he's done this. If I get, funnily enough, if I get invited onto Piers Morgan to talk about, the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, and then Piers springs on me stuff about trans athletes, which he did to me multiple times when I showed up to talk about other things, I would say that that's below the belt. That doesn't seem appropriate. And the way that you behave with integrity on this is you're just honest with people about the topics you want to discuss. But you say that, listen, it's not even about giving you the questions ahead of time. And we often say the questions are really conversational. It's not like I have the questions written down per se. The questions will be dictated by the answers that are given. But if you're under the impression that the topic is the South Carolina primary and the host has no idea about that whatsoever, there is a problem there. And this was a very cut and dry thing. Harrison says, you invited me to talk about X. You only spoke to me about Y. Cain says, that's ridiculous. Why would we possibly invite you on to talk about X? You're a former Democratic chair. Why would you talk about a Republican primary? Maybe that makes sense. But then he checks the emails and he goes, listen, we didn't do anything deliberate, but I can understand why you thought that that's what you were coming on to discuss. Now, to Will Cain's credit, he's at least acknowledging the screw up, because there are a lot of people in political media who would pretend it never happened. But that doesn't erase the original clip's kind of revealing nature, which is that Harrison wasn't refusing to answer difficult questions. He was saying, this was not why I was supposedly here. The premise of the interview was different than what I was told. And then after the cameras were off, they check the communications and they go, oh, I guess Jamie Harrison wasn't so crazy after all. Check the booking notes before cutting off the guest for mentioning them. We've dealt with this. I've dealt with it as a guest. If nothing else, at least Will Cain sort of said, I get why Jamie was confused. If you like this show, I would love for you to get my Substack writing. Each day, I'll send you a rundown of what's on the show, what's happening, what matters, why. It's free, no spam. Substack is also the only place where we own our data. So if we get censored on social media or on any platform, Substack's going to be the only way I can tell you what is going on. Sign up now at davidpakman.substack.com. It's great to welcome back to the program Dr. Zachary Rubin, double board certified pediatrician, allergist, immunologist, author who's reaching millions as a digital medical creator. And his second book, Think Like a Doctor, is now available for pre-order. Good to see you. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. It's good to see you.
So we've got wacky things happening right now with regard to Maha, measles. We've got lockjaw making a return. We are talking about vaccines. I think maybe to start with, talk a little bit about, since we last spoke, it's been some months at this point, are we seeing the concerning consequences of the RFK agenda, or is everything basically going fine, in your opinion?
Well, we definitely have no outcomes showing that America is healthy again.
Right.
That's for certain. Unfortunately, the fruits of 2025 are now coming to fruition in 2026. There are multiple issues that play. A lot of people's feeds are flooded with recalls related to various foods and different medical devices. We have had, I like to say, a wet, hot, poopy summer with the cyclospora outbreak that's been ongoing, that we probably have well over 30,000 Americans who have had explosive diarrhea episodes and hundreds who have been hospitalized, and unfortunately some have passed away, which is very rare for that to happen. But it's a parasitic infection that was not properly traced. And we know that when RFK Jr. became sworn in as Health and Human Services Secretary in early 2025, he made it his mission, along with President Trump, to cut a lot of different positions throughout our federal public health agencies, whether that's the CDC, FDA, USDA, et cetera. And so when we look back at that specific outbreak, which is an unusually high, record-breaking outbreak for a foodborne illness, the FDA took 9 weeks to start to really figure out that Taylor Farms would be implicated. The last outbreak that occurred about 10 years ago took a few weeks less than that. And it does take time to figure out, because it takes a while for people to show up to a doctor's office. They're sick, they have to get tested. It's a specialized test. But this was several weeks late. And then we know that this is likely from a farm in Mexico of iceberg lettuce. And it took about a month for the FDA to actually have boots on the ground and investigate what's going on. And by the time they get there, they're likely not going to learn anything that's going to help us prevent this from happening in the future. And there are just fewer people working these agencies. And oftentimes you hear people talk about ghost agencies within our federal public health system where they have it existing in name, but there's really nobody working these agencies. It's highly, highly concerning.
One of the things I've been noticing is that there seems to be an attitude of growing confidence from the people in the administration about some of the things they are suggesting, even when there's really no empirical reason to be confident about some of these things. I'll give you an example. Earlier on in this second term, Donald Trump and RFK Jr. were sort of like, well, listen, we'd really love to get to the bottom of the autism thing.
Right.
And they kind of said, we think this Tylenol thing may be related. And we have this vague idea of separate the MMR vaccine into 3 independent shots, which, by the way, all my pediatricians friends say, parents are coming and asking for that. And we're like, yeah, it's not available in the United States. That something that is not available to us is being recommended. But the confidence level now, in the last few days, Donald Trump said, I think you're going to see autism rates decline once we start breaking these up. Really just confidently saying this is a cause-effect situation. And once people do this, we will see autism rates go down. What do you make of this entire separate the shots idea, which to me, aside from the fact that that product isn't available, we now have more appointments parents have to remember,
right?
More instances of injection, which while low, theoretically raises the risk of something happening with the shot at the injection site itself. It seems extraordinarily misguided to me. What do you think?
Well, a lot of these recommendations are of the trust me bro type, right? They're just saying these things without any sort of scientific evidence, yet they will deny the actual evidence if it's shown in front of their face. The reality is that the MMR vaccine has been one of the most studied vaccines that we have, and it's been around for decades, longer than you and I have been alive. And it has significantly dropped the number of cases of measles, mumps, and rubella. These are diseases that can not just be life-threatening. Let's be real. It's actually more about the disability that can come from these different infectious diseases. So as an example, if a mom while pregnant gets rubella, the baby will have permanent disability. It's called congenital rubella syndrome. Nobody wants their kid to have that. If you actually see what it looks like, which most people haven't seen a case of it because the vaccines have been so effective,
right?
Where mom has been immune against rubella, as an example. Measles, 1 in 5 develop a complication. Some of it's rather benign, like an ear infection or diarrhea, but some can be severe, like having pneumonia, being hospitalized, permanent hearing loss, brain swelling called encephalitis, which can either happen during the beginning of the infection or years later. It's rare, but there are cases that are absolutely devastating where you get a mild case of measles and then many years later, your brain essentially deteriorates. You have this progressive neurodegenerative disorder called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, or SSPE. And these folks, there's no cure for it. You die. And it's a slow, painful death, kind of like ALS, essentially. It's really scary when something like that happens. And we have a vaccine that is not only safe, but 97% effective after 2 doses of preventing infection compared to if you are not vaccinated. So it's a highly safe, highly effective vaccine. And instead, we have a president who's saying crazy things like, oh, you know, the shot is like a soda bottle's worth. They're just pumping these things into these little beautiful babies. And I just don't understand why people are taking that even an ounce of seriousness. Because if you've ever gone to a pediatrician's office and seen the amount of fluid that's actually given, it's at most, a half an ml of fluid that's given with an injection. It's minuscule. If you combine all of it together, it's about 25 milliliters of fluid given over 18 years of life. That's not even close to a can of Coke. It's absolutely astounding to me. And so the amount of time it will take to actually study this, where we would have a manufacturer create separate vaccines, that's going to take several years and multi-million-dollar effort to get that done, just to tell families, okay, well, these are all live attenuated vaccines. Therefore, in order for them to be as effective, you have to give each one individually spaced out about 28 to 30 days apart. So you're going to tell families they're going to have to pay additional copays and then take off of work additional times. Most vaccines are combined with different antigens, meaning proteins or polysaccharides that we want to train the immune system to understand so it can help either prevent infection or lessen the severity. And you can combine multiple ones and do it at the same time safely. Now, that doesn't mean that there's never risk with any medical intervention, but we always have to ask ourselves, what is the benefits and what are the risks? And we hope that the benefits for an entire population outweigh the known and potential risks. And with the current vaccine schedule, that has been answered time and time and time and time again. And RFK Jr. has been spouting this nonsense really since the early 2000s.
Can you talk a little bit about that risk calculation aspect of this that you mentioned? Because one of the things I think is interesting about your upcoming book, Think Like a Doctor, is you go through the process of explaining how physicians think about risk and uncertainty. And I interviewed a few years ago an economist whose area of expertise is risk and how humans are good or not so good at thinking about things where the risk is statistically low, but very serious if it happens. So like an example would be you get on a US-based commercial flight.
Right.
The risk of an accident is really low. And if you are in an accident, the outcome is probably very bad. And in these scenarios, this is Baruch Fischoff is his name. What he argued was humans are really bad if you say, hey, there's a 1 in 10 million versus a 1 in 40 million risk of something happening. And we're just like, I don't know, that all kind of seems similar to me. Okay. When we talk about something like a vaccine, where we say, here are the risks, here's the odds of getting this condition if you're not vaccinated. Here are the likely outcomes if you were to contract this disease. And here are the risks associated with the vaccine, which will protect you from the disease. We're pretty bad at assessing that at a fundamental math level, aren't we?
Right. And so I don't always preach numbers when it comes to explaining risk to my patients.
Okay.
I talk about what is the common risks, the not so common, and what is considered rare.
Right.
That you're not likely to see. And keep in mind that as a physician, I see patients every single day. And when you look at that over many years, I'm going to see thousands of people. So my ability to look at risk across the population is going to be different than the individual person. So being transparent about what's common, not so common, and what's rare of that medical intervention of doing that versus not doing it has to be discussed and be openly transparent. And then is there any alternatives to that particular medical intervention, whether it's about vaccines or not? And so in my clinical practice, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, when the COVID vaccine was coming out, I would see adverse reactions to vaccines on a fairly regular basis. Some of it we didn't understand initially. And then as time went on, as we learned, I had a lot better understanding about it. And I could explain to people, hey, this can happen with the vaccine. This is what I've actually seen with it. And it's not always rare. Some things are more rare than others. But then let's compare that to what happens if you get infected and the risk based on your health, the medical comorbidities, whether you have diabetes or if you're older, if you have chronic lung disease, et cetera. And so comparing those two, I think, would help people. And the problem is that in a doctor's office, you wait 6 to 12 months to get an appointment, if not even longer, depending on if it's a specialist. And you may get 10 to 15 good minutes with them. That's not enough time to have these discussions, which is one of the big reasons why I wanted to write a book like this, is the fact that we need to have a better understanding of what that thought process is and how we can ask better questions so that those short visits are going to be more productive.
If we think a little bit about the more nutritional side of MAHA, taking a step back from vaccines for a moment, there seem to be some ideas in there that are not unique to RFK Jr., to be clear, that are pretty good ideas, which is it's better to have more movement during the day than less movement.
Absolutely.
Eating more whole foods and getting fewer calories from ultra-processed food, that's a good thing. Then we get into some of this other stuff like we're phasing out red dye. And when I've spoken to nutritionists about this stuff, their consensus view sort of seems to be, listen, the dye isn't doing anything good for you, but even if you have a whole bag of Skittles, the amount, which you shouldn't really be having regularly, the amount of dye is really quite small. And so this seems a little bit like we're getting into distraction science with the dyes specifically. Give us a sense of the nutritional protocols of MAHA, if you will.
Yeah, so I agree with you that there are certain aspects that I think everyone would agree upon, which is really the true low-hanging fruit when we think about it and where the evidence points towards. That ultra-processed foods eaten on a regular basis are not healthy for people. However, we also live in a society where food is becoming more and more expensive. And we're having all these issues with tariffs, these issues with beef imports, a lot of food recalls are happening. And so people don't necessarily have access to nutritious whole foods. And so we have a real crossroads here where if you want to truly embrace a type of Maha movement, then you've got to invest in that, in giving people the opportunity to get access to fresh produce that is not only healthy, but safe at this point, unfortunately, and helping really incentivize less ultra-processed foods, however that may be from an economical and political standpoint. The whole dye issue is, as you say, is a distraction from the bigger issue where people will say this is toxic, and you hear that word a lot with seed oils as an example as well. Yes. When the reality is that's not true. It's overstating the evidence and cherry picking information. Everything in moderation is obviously a slogan that I think everybody could get behind. But oftentimes you hear on social media people demonizing these smaller issues and then over-exaggerating some of the claims. And now we're hearing a lot of people promoting eating a lot of red meat, which is not necessarily healthy. And we talk about the food pyramid, which has been retired for over 10 years, yet they keep saying that that was a part of our nutritional guidelines currently. We've been past that for many years. They just gloss over the Obama administration's My Plate to say, oh, we're just going to flip the food pyramid. And it's confusing when you look at it. Like, what are we supposed to do with that?
That is interesting, where on the one hand, they are talking about more whole, unprocessed foods. And on the other hand, they say, hey, we've lifted millions of people off of food stamps, when all they've really done is make them harder to get and restricted access to them. If you want people to be able to make better choices and have a broader diversity of choices, we've got to deal with food deserts. But as you're talking about, we also have to deal with affordability, which if you take people's food stamps, they will be less positioned to be able to do. So there's some contradictions in these policies.
Exactly. So it's a big conundrum that a lot of what they're saying is not driven by the actual scientific evidence. But, you know, when you hear RFK Jr. say you shouldn't eat anything that comes in a package but comes from the ground, that's awfully confusing because there are plenty of healthy options that are prepackaged, right? If you get frozen vegetables, they have a longer shelf life. They're still healthy for you.
Speaking of that, what do you think is the biggest incorrect piece of information around food and nutrition and grocery shopping that's become sort of accepted, even though it's really wrong at its core?
One of the ones that immediately comes to mind is the idea that if you can't pronounce the ingredient, it must be bad for you.
Yeah.
You know, dihydrogen monoxide. Oh my gosh. That's really scary. If you have too much of it, it's really toxic. Okay. It's something that really scares a lot of people. You know, water, right? Ascorbic acid. Oh my gosh, vitamin C. Right. So the scientific terms can sometimes scare people. I mean, even RFK Jr. can't pronounce riboflavin.
Yes.
You know, so that is such a weird myth that's been perpetuated, that when people don't understand something, it becomes a conspiracy theory that if you can't pronounce these things, it must be bad. And I think that's one of the low-hanging fruits of, you know, myths that's easily debunkable, yet people still hang on to that as if, you know, oh my gosh, if we look at the scientific naming for egg, like ovalbumin ovomucoid, it must be dangerous, but that's the list of the ingredients that makes up an egg. So that's just very strange to me.
That is a weird one. The second book of Dr. Zachary Rubin is now available for pre-order. It's Think Like a Doctor. You can follow him on a large variety of social media platforms. Always appreciate your time, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
The David Pakman Show is an audience-supported program, and the best, most direct way to support the show is by becoming a member at joinpakman.com. You'll get the daily bonus show, the daily commercial-free show, and plenty of other great membership perks. Get the full experience by signing up at joinpakman.com. Donald Trump just gave an interview where he seemed incapable of finishing a single thought without something going terribly wrong. And I don't mean, oh, Trump gave a weird answer and the conversation was mostly normal. I am talking about an interview where Donald Trump is confusing everything. He's threatening Canada. He's suggesting maybe we're inspecting meat too much. And he continues to make Dolly Parton's death about himself. And the whole time, Glenn Beck, the interviewer, is sitting there giggling along with him. It is remarkable to watch because every time Trump starts answering a question, you just have no idea where he's going, what he's talking about. And it starts with Dolly Parton. Glenn Beck asked Donald Trump about the death of someone who is, quite frankly, one of the most beloved entertainers in American history. Everybody liked Dolly. And Trump's response is, the most important thing is, she really liked me. And by the way, that doesn't seem to be true. Not only is Trump making it about himself, but it really doesn't seem that Trump's politics were anything that Dolly would like. But it's Trump, so he makes it about himself.
We all knew her so well. I knew her a little bit. She wasn't a very political person. She really liked me, I will tell you. But she also wanted to stay very, She was of the opinion, the 50%, who needs to lose. I don't think it's 50. I think it's probably 20% of the fans, okay, not 50. But she was a great person, and she was just a nice person. I liked her a lot. And I thought it was a natural thing to lower the flags.
And she liked me, most importantly. Well, everything that I have ever seen Dolly Parton say about social issues, cultural issues, political issues, education issues seems to run completely counter to everything that Donald Trump believes and stands for. And Dolly Parton dies. And Trump's big contribution to the national remembrance is, by the way, she really liked me. And this is so important a reminder of the Trumpian theory of human existence. There are people who like Donald Trump and people who don't like Donald Trump, and people who Trump simply hasn't figured out yet. Do they like me? Do they really like me? Or do they just hate me? And it is the most important filter and prism through which Donald Trump evaluates everybody. Okay, we then get to the topic of the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump makes an attempt to reassure everybody it's all going completely beautiful.
Prior to the war, prior to what we're doing with Iran, which I think will be ending fairly soon, you could really say, because the strait is open. We take a lot of ships through the strait now. We're taking them in. The mines are gone. You probably saw that. We put it out yesterday, all the mines. We got rid of the mines. But the strait, it's functioning. It's a functioning strait. Yes, every once in a while there'll be a drone or a rocket or something shot.
Every once in a while you'll get droned.
But it is a very functioning strait. A lot of oil is pouring out. 10 million gallons, 10 million barrels yesterday. Prior to
gallons, barrels, who cares, right? First of all, every once in a while there will be a drone or rocket is an incredible way to describe a functioning, totally peaceful international shipping lane. It's working beautifully. Imagine your airline saying, listen, the airline is operating beautifully. Every once in a while, a rocket will come through the airport, but we are just, you can go and get your $7 bottles of water and all of that stuff. It's all working great. And then we get this confusion as to what is the oil supply. Are we talking about barrels or gallons? And this is the president discussing one of the most strategically important waterways on the planet. And the sentence barely survives until the end. Take a listen to this.
Canada. It seems to me they had a really good deal, but this is all about the elections and throwing our elections. What is happening? Is there a way to end this?
Look, I don't know how you feel about Canada. They are one of the worst countries in the world to deal with. And this has gone on for many years.
Wait. Can we say this? I love Canadians and Canada. Correct. I do not like their administration.
Okay, well, right? The administration and the previous administration too was terrible.
Yes.
But they have taken advantage of the United States for many decades. Actually, they charge tariffs that are unbelievable, like on milk, 400% And I just said, we're taking them on. And I took them on at the beginning, but we had so many other things to do because the country was a mess. But I said, we're going to take them on. We're going to stop it. And you saw the Lake Ontario. People thought I was kidding, but maybe
so
I wasn't.
Funny.
Because the last one you saw was the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America.
I know.
But now we have a Gulf and we have a lake, okay? It's very simple. But look, I don't want to go into great detail because it's maybe boring to people, but to me it's not boring. They charge tariffs. They take advantage of us as though they were a state, and they're not a state. And they've taken our car industry, and they've taken our agriculture industry.
Yeah.
The farmers can't sell anything in there because the tariffs are so enormous.
Remember, it's Trump who has crushed the farmers and the ranchers.
And yet they want to sell in us without any tariffs. So I had a deal. That was a pretty good deal, quite good, because they're afraid that I won't do any business. In other words, we won't trade. They don't have anything that we have to have, okay? We can get by. I mean, there are a couple of things that
is very much untrue.
Make it a little inconvenient, but we can get them elsewhere. And it's time to teach Canada you can't do this anymore. We lose $60 billion and really more than that, $60 billion a year with Canada.
Mr. President,
we can't do that.
I can't believe I have to say this to you. I have a network break. You could hold on, but I know you're busy. I so appreciate your time, sir. I am sorry that we're on a network break.
Terrific.
I have a network
thank you for the painting. That was so beautiful.
Listen, this whole premise is completely effed. Like, put aside for a second Glenn Beck giggling and the complete insanity of it all. Canada supplied close to 100% of U.S. imported natural gas last year. 98% of natural gas liquids. 85% of potash fertilizer, potash. I never know how to pronounce that. 81% of the electricity we import is from Canada. 63% of the crude oil, our largest aluminum supplier, our number one uranium supplier. This idea that we're fine without Canadian imports. Give me a break. And the whole renaming the lake thing, we're going to get back to that, but we have a Gulf and a lake now, just painfully stupid. And what's insane is that Canada is probably going to have no choice but to capitulate after finding out that Donald Trump has unlocked a body of water. Just kidding. I don't think that renaming with a Sharpie on a map a body of water is going to get Canada to do anything that Trump wants them to do. And then finally, Trump starts talking about meat processors and says, we might be doing a little too much inspection of meat. We might be doing a little too much regulation of meat.
For the country.
That would be good.
No, I've been hearing only bad about it's 4 places and it's a monopoly.
It is.
And who's controlling
this would break their back.
Who's controlling those regulations? Department of Agriculture?
Yes, an FDA.
And the FDA.
Or U.S. or is it USDA? I can't remember which one, but it's
USDA.
It's the federal regulation. It's all the
neither of them have any idea.
Inspections. It's all the inspections.
This is where the incoherence, if the incoherence was funny to you before, this is where it stops being funny. Meat inspections and food safety regulations are not bureaucratic abstractions. They exist because contaminated meat can make people really sick. It can even kill them. And there is a legitimate conversation to have about if we have redundant regulations, let's look at getting rid of them. Or if we can make government more efficient in some way, let's do that. But maybe we don't need so much inspection of the meat is not where I want the president giving us his harebrained ideas. And when you take it all together, Dolly Parton dies. She liked me. The Strait of Hormuz. It's fine. Every once in a while, there are just drones and rockets. Canada. We're going to teach them a lesson by renaming the lake. Meat inspection. Maybe we just do fewer inspections. This is a nightmare. And Glenn Beck is sitting there laughing along as though this resembles a normal conversation with the president of the United States. We have to recognize we have become accustomed to Trump speaking this way so that the individual moments barely register anymore. But you put 4 of them next to each other and compare it to how we used to see presidents speak. And you remember, this is profoundly bizarre. This is profoundly embarrassing. This is humiliating. This is a disaster. But Glenn Beck just chuckles along, and we're all supposed to go, isn't this all so funny? Donald Trump is now sitting around the White House playing with maps and talking about renaming Lake Ontario because he's mad. He's big mad at Canada. They were mean to me. And somehow seeing Trump explain this idea makes it a lot weirder. Donald Trump posted this video to his TikTok insisting, look at this map. We might rename Lake Ontario to Lake America. Take a look at this.
So this is Lake Ontario in Canada and in the United States. But we're going to make a little change. We're going to call it something different than Lake Ontario. We're going to call it Lake America. And all it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. So now we have a lake, and now we have a gulf, because we have the Gulf of America, and now we have Lake America, without the of. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy Lake America.
So there he is, looking at a map, pointing at the lake, explaining, because Lake Ontario is partially in the United States, maybe it should be Lake America. And it comes a day after Trump announced on Truth Social that the U.S. is seriously considering changing the name of Lake Ontario. Now, I want to remind you of the sentence the president actually wrote, quote, "The United States is giving serious consideration to changing the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America, in that we don't expect to doing much business with Ontario any longer. We have progressed from barely coherent social media posts to Trump sitting with a map and a Sharpie and explaining lakes to us. And the ostensible reason for all of this is another stupid trade war, optional, that Donald Trump has chosen to escalate with Canada. U.S.-Canada trade negotiations broke down last week. Trump said we're doing 50% tariffs on $20 billion worth of Canadian goods. Canada says, then we'll do tariffs on you as well. And Trump goes, well, I know you are, but what am I? And threatened to put even more tariffs on Canadian cars and auto parts and steel, which are very much from the Ontario province that they are imported to the United States. And the whole response after all of it is, we're trading partners, we're having a problem, we're having a conflict. What if I rename the lake? Now, there are a number of problems here. First, Lake Ontario is an international body of water. The U.S.-Canada border runs through Lake Ontario. 53% of the lake is in Canada. 47% of the lake is in the United States. Trump, I guess, could direct the federal government to call it something else. Like he says, oh, we don't call it the Gulf of Mexico, we call it the Gulf of America. But he can't force Canada to change it. He can't force anybody to call it the Lake of America, Lake America. Now, number two, and this is maybe my favorite part, the lake isn't even named after the Canadian province. Trump's idea is, well, they don't get to name it after their province. It should be named after us. But that's not the way it happened. The name Ontario comes from an Indigenous word, which translates as Lake of Shining Waters. And the name of the lake predates both the United States and Canada. Ontario, the province, was named after the lake. So Trump is angry at a lake. He is a guy yelling at a cloud personified. And we are going to punish the lake by changing its name. It's a lake, folks. The lake isn't criticizing Trump. It's not imposing tariffs on anybody. It's not involved in trade negotiations. But somehow this is where the feud has gone. And it is not a random joke Trump made once and moved on from. He's now posting about it. He's doing doctored maps. He's crossing out Lake Ontario and writing Lake America. He's recording videos, taking time on this to say, maybe I'm kidding, maybe I'm not. And then the White House gets involved and they post a cartoon map celebrating Lake America, except their map puts Washington, D.C. in the wrong place. Their map put Washington, D.C. in North Carolina. Maybe it was AI generated. They can't even make a map correctly. Now, there is a lot of obvious comedy in this entire thing. I acknowledge that. But this is genuinely embarrassing. If you are someone who respects the office of the presidency and believes that whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, There should be a certain level of respect for the office. And that is part of what makes the United States what it is, which is our our allies also respect the office, even if they don't necessarily agree with everything the president does. That goes out the window when Trump behaves like this. It is genuinely embarrassing to see a president of the United States devote his time to this. And it's not even devote his time to this while nothing important is going on. He's devoting his time to this while American consumers and businesses are seeing a cost of living crisis. We are damaging really important relationships with some of our closest neighbors. And he's sitting there pointing at a lake, trying to come up with a new name for it. This is where we are. Trump is angry at a body of water. And now that body of water is going to pay. We're going to suck it dry. All right. We will talk about what is going on with the Lindsay Clancy trial. Haven't spoken about this much on the bonus show today. Buc-ee's says it will prioritize conservative, business-friendly states. Oh boy, what does that mean? And AOC rejoins DSA after allowing her membership to lapse for 7 years. All of that and more on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpakman.com to get instant access. And just days remain. Next week, I'm signing all the signed pre-orders of my book. If you want to get a signed copy of the book, this is it, folks. We are days away from the book's release, and you can get signed copies or not signed copies, or the audiobook or the Kindle, whatever you want, at davidpakman.com/attention. Thank you to everyone who has done it. Thank you for everyone who will do it today.